Hello, my friends. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Welcome back to another episode of our /ProRevenge, where many of you come to get your daily dose of satisfaction by listening to other people get what they deserve. Guys, today's episode is going to be a wild one. There are going to be 6 stories. The first story is about a terrible neighbor getting what he deserves. The second story is how OP gets back at a person who caused their family so much pain. I hope you stay for the stories today and subscribe for future videos. This first story is titled, My Parents and Sister Feared Their Only Neighbor for 5 Years. Around 8 years ago, my parents and sister had moved out to a log cabin that we built as a family. For 6+ years, they lived on a secluded lake and bought 10 acres for themselves. To the north, another couple bought the 5-acre plot right next to us. We were the only 2 neighbors next to each, well, for about 1.8 miles. At first, the couple was friendly and had no problems at all. After around 6 months of them living there and building their new home, my parents bought 144 acres to the north of them. This means that his property is sandwiched between our 2 properties, and the only way we could get to our land is to cross his strip of land. Due to easement laws, he had no problem at first, but one day, the trail we used to get to our land to the north was covered with large logs, branches, yellow tape, and a no trespassing sign. My dad went to ask what was going on. The owner, who we'll call John, came up to my dad and me and demanded that we give him a 20-yard wide and 40-yard long piece of our property to the north of him. He said he wanted to cut down some trees to the north of him to make sure that none of them fell onto his house since it's a thickly wooded area. So, of course, my dad said no, and that he wouldn't even sell a small portion of that land that he requested to be given to him for free. This is where the 5 years of hell started. Before I mention all the bat-crap crazy things he's done to us over the years, I want to point out that he's a born fraud, and took a settlement from the railroad company he used to work for an injury that would leave him disabled for life, which is not true at all. We found out that he sues everyone that gets in his way, because his oldest daughter is a lawyer and works the system. Here is a small list of things he's pulled, mainly towards my parents, and he's gotten away with everything for 5 years because his daughter tells him exactly how to stay in the clear. He has slashed the tires of our 2 4-wheelers so we couldn't drive them to our land to the north. On 2 occasions, he has shot or slashed the tires of our vehicles when we were gone in the middle of the night. We put up cameras, but they were not clear enough to prove it was him. He threatened my dog's life. My golden retriever, Bailey, is outside for most of the day, and John's dog is also named Bailey. The 2 dogs love to play together, but John did not like that. He said he would put a bullet into my dog if he was ever on his property again. After that, weeks later, he would start to yell out Bailey to lure our dog onto his property. I then saw him grab my dog by the collar, put a pistol to his head, and say that if this dog ever came onto his property again or played with his dog, we'd find our dog in the ground. On several occasions, he would hit golf balls into our windows and blame it on me since I was a golfer. Once again, everything he did we could not prove in court. When his house was being built, he went through 3 different contractors because John was threatening to sue every contractor for every little thing, and all 3 contractors left him. When he was getting his driveway poured, he offered to help the contractor, and once again he was pulling another scam. Where I live, if someone starts helping a contractor with work, there is a weird law that states that a contractor would need to pay John for the work he helped with. Long story short, this went to court, and he got his $10,000 driveway for free, plus John took the guy for another $15,000 for some other stuff that his lawyer daughter helped with. We were in the process of finishing up my parents' house, and he stole very specific wood from our place to use in his house. It was a couple $1,000s worth of wood. Once again, we did not have enough evidence for a search warrant. And the last reason, during Thanksgiving dinner several years ago, our house started on fire due to the stonemason cutting corners and using cheap and wrong parts for the fireplace. Firefighters from 5 cities were dispatched because we live in the country. Due to the amount of fire trucks that were coming and going, John thought it was a nuisance and took his truck and parked it sideways on a strip of road that was so tight that the firefighters coming and going could not get through. He stated that we were ruining their Thanksgiving due to the commotion of our house being burnt down and the fire truck sirens. The next fire truck showed up and used force within their rights to plow his truck off the road. John tried to sue us and the fire department for damaging his truck, but it never made it to courts because the fire department had the rights to do so. What I listed above only scratched the surface. There's so much more that he did to my family that my mom and sister wanted to move because they were afraid of what he might do next. And this is where all the pieces started falling into place to take him down. The spring after our house burnt down, there was a storm, and 2 trees from our property fell onto John's lawn. He called, demanding that we remove the trees. We had no equipment at this time and told him that we couldn't get to it immediately. So what John did was cut down a 20 by 40 yard area of trees to drag the trees to our property to the north of him. Later, he set the pile of wood on fire and burned down 20 plus more trees and 20 acres of prairie grass, and one of the trees that burnt down to the north was inhabited by a bald eagle. We could confirm the 24 trees he cut down to drag the fallen trees through, but couldn't prove who started the fire to burn the trees. When I saw that he had cut down a number of our trees on our property to the north of him, I took detailed photos of all the cut down trees and marked the type of tree and how thick the trunks were. It turns out in my state there is a monetary value to those trees, and he was screwed. However, when I was marking the trees he cut down, I realized that I didn't know where the true property line was. A few weeks later, I found the prints to where the property line was, and where he built his house. I now know why John wanted that land. His 5,000 square foot underground propane tank was a few feet on our property. Now, during this time, John had put his house up for sale and put a $120,000 markup on what the actual market price was. We found out why he was doing this because he and a friend had gambled a lot of their savings on buying the property around the lake in hopes of reselling. We were finally able to put a lien on his house, and that was his only lifeline to get cash to make their land payments. To make the rest of the story go by faster, I'll skip to the part where we ended up buying the house. We told him to put the price back down to market value, and then my father said that we could settle the price of the trees that he cut down that belonged to us outside of court, and he agreed to settle on lowering the price. My dad also identified the stolen wood, and we could trace it back to the same unique wood in our house, and we would sue him for that too, or he could drop the price for stealing our materials. Lastly, because John was a jerk, my dad used the leverage of the lien we had on the house to drop the value even more. John was bleeding money and was desperate for anything, so in the end, my parents bought his house for 28% of its market value, and John's wife would end up leaving him a year later. He filed for bankruptcy and lost his land development area since he was upside down on the payments, and he now lives in a cheap studio apartment alone. Update: the reason there were no lawsuits towards the end is because the amount of money he lost on his house was way more money than if we were to file a lawsuit against him. I really should have mentioned this in my post. It seems a few are asking why it took so long to know about the property line. There was an old barbed wire fence that was near where the property line was, and both parties assumed that the fence was the property line. When I found the old survey of the land, there were notes made regarding how many feet south of each post was the true property line. So, the true property line was around 20 feet south from what we had thought. So, John pretty much deserved everything he got in this story. The part where he was using his daughter's knowledge of the law to commit acts of crime was already terrible, but threatening OP's dog with a pistol had me freaking enraged. Oh yeah, and here's a beautiful picture of that dog that OP posted. What kind of monster would threaten this beautiful dog? Look at that face! This story is titled, Always clear your memory card before pawning an item. Backstory: basically, a lady, who we'll call Leech, spent a year helping her best friend, Psycho, harass my family and me over a custody dispute. Leech wasn't related to the family at all, just a friend with an affinity for causing drama. She would make fake profiles along with Psycho and tried to fish information about us out of friends and family, just some real nasty stuff. Leech would take the online harassment further than Psycho, which never made any sense to me because we had never had any personal problems with Leech. We had known each other back in grade school and were even casual friends, and she used our past history to try to weasel into my friends list, but I already saw that she was helping Psycho slander my name online and didn't buy into her nonsense. She then started copying my profile pictures and making them into ugly memes. Any post I made public was instantly captured and mocked on her stepmother's support page. Leech was dating Psycho's husband's best friend. Her boyfriend had a daughter from a previous relationship, and Leech was a proud and attentive stepmother. Most of her identity revolved around being a stepmother. The page on which she posted the meme she made had been running for a number of years and had nearly 10,000 members, and she created it herself. She and Psycho also started a handful of other pages for the sole purpose of harassing and mocking our family. This had been going on since before March, and for Christmas that year, my wife's grandmother got each of the great-grandkids a 3 deciseconds to save some money. She went to a pawn shop for some gently used consoles and games, and this is where karma had dealt us a sweet hand. Nana had purchased 4 Nintendo 3DS consoles in total. The one my daughter had just happened to have a memory card inside full of photos. Upon a quick scan, I realized that the people looked familiar. It was Leach and her boyfriend, over and over, dozens of photos, some a little racy. Why else would I be given this opportunity? Of course I was meant to use them, right? I immediately got to work, uploading every photo and file, and set up a fake email account with bits of her information to make it look like hers. I joined any and all dating sites I could think of, and even downloaded some apps that aren't advertised as dating, but we all know that's how they're used. In short, I plastered her selfies everywhere. I refrained from using inappropriate ones because I just didn't feel right about that. I answered a couple of messages on each site to make it look more authentic, even sharing more innocent selfies to prove that I was the real deal. A while ago I had come across Leach's cell number online. She had shared it in a public comment, and I was in the process of screen capping any post she made about my family. I had screen capped that comment too, but I hadn't done anything with it. I was just gathering and retaining all of the information I could, and my patience was about to pay off. After giving a few guys the number, I didn't bother logging on anymore. That was enough damage, I thought. It would be easy enough for her to prove that she had never visited those sites, and they should be able to recognize the photos as being taken with a crappy lens of an early 3DS. But then the other boot dropped. After a few weeks, maybe a month, I went snooping on Leach's stepmother's support page to see if she had anything to say about my antics. But it was quiet. I checked out her profile and found that all the past posts had been hidden, and the boyfriend was scrubbed of all the photos available. When I checked out his profile, there was a giant rant about unfaithful jerks. Oops! It turns out that Leach had been sleeping with her psycho husband's brother. It had been going on for some time and no one knew anything, not even Psycho. He then ended the relationship immediately. Being a self-proclaimed stay-at-home mom, Leach had no interest in holding a job. The boyfriend owned everything and paid for everything, including her cell phone. When he found out about the affair, he kicked her out of the house and took her phone. He pawned all of it to pay for some of the enormous debt she had put him in. The reason the 3DS was in the pawn shop at all was because he needed some extra cash. It was his 3DS, and he pawned it for some money for a present for her. He wasn't able to pay it all back in time, and the shop owner resold the item, and that's why his memory card wasn't wiped or anything. And I'd say it was meant to be. The boyfriend should have taken the memory card out of the 3DS, even though he planned on coming back for it. The only person in this world who uses their Nintendo 3DS for taking pictures had it come back and bite them in the butt. This story is titled, Maya and I Get Her Boss Sent to Prison. Maya is a good friend of mine. She's a sweet and caring mother of 2 young children. She's also a widow and was an undocumented immigrant. She came here in early 2008 with her husband and 1-year-old daughter, pregnant with her second child. Her husband worked long hours as a field worker, often 60 to 70 hours a week. They had been in this country for maybe half a year when disaster struck. Her husband was killed in a car crash on the way to work one morning. She did what she had to do and got a job at a local donut shop and cafe. At first she was happy because everyone but the owner was an immigrant and she had much in common with her co-workers. The boss told her she could work as many hours as she needed, which she really needed. But it quickly became apparent that there was a dark underside to the shop. The owner would only hire undocumented workers with no documentation. He told them that if they worked hard for him, he'd take care of them, but if they didn't, he'd call immigration officers and they'd be deported. He scheduled them for 48 hours a week and didn't believe in overtime. He scheduled them for 6 days a week, with no sick days and no vacation days. She came to me and asked what to do. I informed her that what the boss was doing was illegal, that he was violating Department of Labor regulations, and that he was counting on her fear to keep her quiet. Taking my advice, she did one of the bravest things I've ever seen in my life. She made that call to the Department of Labor, knowing that she could get fired and that she and her children could be deported. Well, the Department of Labor came down and did an investigation. They found that the boss owed his employees over $27,000 for the time in question. The boss reached an agreement that he would pay all of his employees back the wages they were owed by an agreed-upon date, and this is the part that sent him to federal prison. He called each employee one at a time into his office and handed them a check for the overtime they were owed. For each employee, it was over $3,300. He told them to endorse the check because he needed a photocopy to send to the Department of Labor. They complied, he copied it, and then he leaned over and ran it through the shredder. He told them that if anyone complained to the feds, they'd all get deported and to get back to work. She came to me crying, saying she needed that money and asking what she could do now. Well, folks, this crook was going down. So I was the one who reported Mr. Jerkface. The local paper had carried the story when he agreed to the restitution, so it was only a matter of a few clicks to find the pertinent information I needed. I called the Department of Labor's office in our state capital and was transferred to the original investigators. I explained what Maya had told me and her fears if she complained. They were incredulous at his audacity and vowed to look into it. Usually the federal machine grinds slowly, if at all, but this was too much for the Department of Labor. In just 2 months, a federal grand jury handed down a 10-count indictment for concealment by trick, making false statements to the U.S. Department of Labor, and willful failure to pay overtime to his employees. Stupid boss. It turns out that a conviction for concealment by trick and making false statements carries a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment and a $250,000 fine, or both. A conviction for willful failure to pay overtime carries a maximum penalty of 6 months imprisonment and a $10,000 fine, or both. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison. I don't know if he served the whole sentence, but I bet he never pulls that stunt again. Postscript to this story, my boss went to jail at the end of 2011. Maya and her co-workers stayed at the Donut Cafe, which was run by the boss's wife. No one was deported. I don't know about the others, but Maya became a U.S. citizen in the fall of 2016. She has since remarried, and the kids are doing well in school. She now works as a secretary at a local company, making far more than she did slinging donuts. I'm very proud of her. There are far too many stories out there about employers preying on undocumented immigrants, and it really took guts for Maya to call and report her boss. Guys, please excuse my ignorance of the situation because I literally know nothing about immigration, but if the people came to investigate his shop, charged him for all those crimes, and saw that he only hired undocumented immigrants without documentation, how did Maya end up becoming a U.S. citizen? This next story is titled, How I Made $2,000 Off a Meth Dealer. A few years ago, I was married to a troubled individual who struggled with addiction. She wasn't originally like that, but addiction does what it does. I kept interfering with her lifestyle, trying to get her treatment, and she rewarded my efforts with a restraining order. Who would have thought? So, I got kicked out of my place and ended up in a studio apartment with nothing but my toothbrush and the clothes I was wearing. One of her grand plans was to get a front for a ton of drugs using everything of value we owned as collateral. Long story short, the drug dealer literally took everything we owned and put it in storage somewhere in town. My wife planned to take all the drugs, sell them by the end of the weekend, and become a millionaire, which is, of course, flawed logic. She messed up the plan and ended up using all the drugs herself. So, now all of our expensive stuff was gone. I tried to work out something with the drug dealer, but he wanted an absurd amount of money. Plus I made some threatening comments that he didn't appreciate, so negotiations stalled. Eventually I caught wind that he got locked up and that some of his friends took all of his property and put it into a storage unit for safekeeping until he got out. I hit every storage place in town with my story and a picture, hoping to catch some kind of break. Eventually I found the place. The owner told me that the unit was going up for auction the next weekend for non-payment. He said if I just paid the 3 months back rent, he'd write it up as if I won the auction, and I could have the unit. $320 got slapped on the counter, and we went to drill the lock. All of my stuff was there, and what do you know? Now I owned all of his stuff, free and clear. Since I'm a nice guy, I dug out all the personal, irreplaceable stuff like old photos and important documents, boxed them up, and gave them to his mom, who I found on Facebook. I actually made quite a bit of money off the deal, selling his stuff on Craigslist. It came out to about $2,000. I'm divorced now, have all of my stuff, and I'm happy. I hope he's doing okay. He's a pretty stand-up guy for returning all the personal and irreplaceable stuff. A lot of people would have just had a bonfire with all that stuff. This next story is titled, Girls Shouldn't Win Math Competitions, So My Son Should Win. I am a high school student, and this happened to me in the 9th grade. My teacher decided that I should compete in a math competition because she saw potential in me. I agreed because she was my favorite teacher, though I really didn't care that much because I was kind of lazy at the time. On the day of the competition, I saw a kid boasting about how he didn't sleep because he reviewed everything. I was annoyed but didn't think much of it. The results came, and sure enough he won, but I got second place. I was shocked and happy at the same time, and so was my teacher. Everything was all sunshine and rainbows until I heard this lady say, "Good thing that girl didn't win. This is a math competition. My boy should win. He studied really hard for this, and a girl shouldn't beat him." I was livid. My teacher patted me on the back and told me not to listen to her. When they announced that I was in second place, the entitled mom started booing. I couldn't take it, so I devised a plan. This competition happened every year, according to my teacher, and in 10th grade there was a regional competition. I swore that I had to win the next year. The whole year I taught myself various math equations, and my friends helped me with everything. I spent a whole year reviewing just to prove this entitled mother wrong. The next year, I entered the competition more ready than ever. I saw the boy again, and his mother was boasting about how he couldn't sleep, knowing he was going to win again, and that he was excited about regionals. Everything she said encouraged me to do better. The exam was kind of hard, but I managed to answer most of the test questions. The announcements came, and they said only one person got a score of 40 and above in every grade level. The entitled kid was smirking, thinking it was him, and telling his mom, "Regionals, here we go." But to his surprise, I won. The look of shock on the entitled mom's and the entitled kids' faces was worth it. They didn't utter a single word. His teacher was just standing there, shocked. I gave them a big smile and went up the stage, accepting the prize and everything. When I went down the stage, I saw the entitled mother crying, saying, "My boy was supposed to win. He was supposed to go to regionals." Once I heard her cries of agony, the whole year of reviewing paid off. I got second place in the regional competition and became friends with the guy in first place. Overall, it was a great experience, and I'm glad I don't ever have to see the entitled mom and the entitled kid again, because there's no math competition in grade 11. Guys, this is a great pro-revenge. No harm, no foul, and the original poster definitely deserved this revenge. That's true dedication to revenge. So, before I begin this last story, a subscriber actually linked me this pro-revenge after my Entitled People episode, where an entitled girl was upset that nobody paid attention to her after she was proposed to at her friend's wedding. This next story is about what happens if you propose at a wedding you're not supposed to be proposing at, and it's titled, "Don't Announce Your Engagement at Someone Else's Wedding, or This Might Happen to You." Last summer, I was at my cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, who I'll call Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife, who I'll call Emma, didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but kept grinning and acted very happy for the couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation, and this is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in the baskets to blue ones she secretly brought with her. She told the sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme, but of course she didn't say anything about it in the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids, who were also Emma's friends and had attended Emma's wedding, were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen and at first showed some pretty humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and her other friends to facilitate a couple of lighthearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones that were planned. That's when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant, that she had just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals, And the last slide was her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly that I sincerely regret watching the Snapchat recording with headphones. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle, I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore. I guess the only way to outshine an engagement announcement at a wedding is to announce a pregnancy. That's going to be remembered for a long time, and I'm sure it'll be talked about for a long time too. Below are my opinions on each of the stories. Story 1. My parents and sister feared their only neighbor for 5 years. This story had me fuming. John sounds like an absolute menace, terrorizing your family for 5 years with his scams and threats, especially holding a pistol to your sweet dog Bailey's head. That alone had me ready to cheer for his downfall. His audacity to demand your land, slash tires, and block firefighters during your house fire is next-level villainy. The fact that his lawyer daughter helped him skirt accountability makes it even worse. Your dad's strategic move to use the property line discovery and the tree-cutting evidence to put a lien on his house was brilliant. Buying his house for 28% of its value and watching him lose everything, his wife, his land deal, his money, feels like sweet justice. This story is a masterclass in using patience and leverage to take down a bully. Also, that picture of Bailey? Adorable. How dare John threaten that cutie? Story 2. Always, always clear your memory card before pawning an item. Oh man, this one's a delicious twist of fate. Leach's relentless harassment, making ugly memes and fake profiles to mess with your family, was so uncalled for, especially since you were casual friends in the past. Finding her and her boyfriend's photos on that pawned 3 deciseconds memory card was like karma handing you a golden ticket. Uploading those selfies to dating sites and sharing her number was a clever way to stir up chaos without crossing into unethical territory. The fallout, her boyfriend discovering her affair with Psycho's brother and kicking her out, was pure poetic justice. The irony that her own 3 deciseconds betrayal led to her losing her home and phone is just chef's kiss. This story shows how sometimes the universe sets up the perfect revenge if you're patient enough to seize it. Story 3. Maya and I get her boss sent to prison. This story is so inspiring. Maya's courage as an undocumented widow risking deportation to report her exploitative boss is nothing short of heroic. That jerk preying on vulnerable workers, shredding their overtime checks and threatening deportation is despicable. Your decision to escalate the report to the Department of Labor was spot on, and the fact that it led to a federal indictment and 5 years in prison? Absolutely satisfying. I love that Maya and her co-workers kept their jobs, and her becoming a U.S. citizen and thriving as a secretary is the happy ending she deserved. To answer your question about immigration, it's likely Maya's case was handled separately, possibly through a pathway like a U visa for victims of workplace abuse, but I'm no expert. This story's a powerful reminder that standing up to bullies can change lives for the better. Story 4. How I made $2,000 off a meth dealer. This one's a wild ride with a surprisingly wholesome twist. Your ex's addiction and betrayal leading to a restraining order and losing all your possessions sounds like a nightmare. Tracking down that storage unit and snagging it for $320 was a stroke of luck and hustle. Making $2,000 off the dealer's stuff while returning his personal items to his mom shows you've got a good heart despite everything. It's satisfying to hear you got your stuff back and moved on to a happier life, while the dealer's stuck dealing with his own mess. This story's a great mix of resourcefulness and petty revenge, proof that sometimes doing the right thing still comes with a sweet payoff. Story 5. Girls shouldn't win math competitions, so my son should win. I'm so proud of you for this one. That entitled mom booing you for getting second place in a math competition just because you're a girl is infuriating. Her "my boy should win" nonsense lit a fire under you, and your year-long dedication to studying paid off spectacularly. Beating her son in the next competition and seeing their shocked faces must have felt incredible. That big smile you flashed while accepting the prize? Iconic. Making it to regionals and befriending the first-place winner is the cherry on top. This story is a perfect example of channeling anger into hard work and proving the haters wrong without stooping to their level. You're a rock star for showing that girls absolutely belong in math. Story 6. Don't announce your engagement at someone else's wedding or this might happen to you. This is petty revenge done right. Sarah stealing the spotlight at your cousin's wedding with her engagement announcement was so tacky, and Emma's restraint in the moment was classy. But her revenge at Sarah's wedding? Pure genius. Switching the flower girl's petals to blue and dropping the pregnancy bombshell with an ultrasound slide during the speech was a masterstroke. The chaos, Sarah's fit, the cheering bridesmaids, and Emma's gentle, I'm pregnant clapback, had me laughing out loud. It's the perfect way to outshine a selfish move without ruining the day entirely. This story's a reminder that stealing someone's thunder can come back to bite you in the most spectacular way. These stories are a fantastic blend of strategic, petty, and downright epic revenge. From taking down a menacing neighbor to outsmarting entitled moms and wedding crashers, they show how creativity and patience can deliver justice. Each one's a lesson in standing up for what's right, and I had a blast reading them. Thanks for sharing.